Laura. It is so good to be back in Grangeville. This is exactly where we met just before the Medicaid expansion vote, I believe, back in 2018. And just to, we're probably all pretty much on the same page on this, but just to remind everyone, our first big statewide campaign as an organization was Medicaid expansion back in 2018. And something I like to remind people whenever I'm around here is that this part of the state was pivotal in that campaign, because we're here in legislative district 7, which is one of the largest state legislative districts in Idaho and probably one of the largest state legislative districts in the United States. It starts all the way up in Sagal near Sandpoint, and then it wraps around all the cities and it comes clear down to Riggins. And Grangeville is the biggest town in the entire district. And I think last time I checked, it's like the size of Massachusetts or something. This district, it's massive. And that means it is the most rural. This is the biggest town, and no one would have guessed that this would be one of the 18 districts that would qualify Medicaid expansion for the ballot, but it was.
Woo!
It was.
And we're gonna do it again.
And on that note, I want to just give a big thank you, especially to all of you, but especially to Laura and to Shireen for the leadership role they've taken on, because the entire way that this works, and that you can, get 18 different districts qualifying an initiative for the ballot, it all has to do with local leadership. If our organization was just a small group of people like driving around in a camper and collecting signatures wherever we went, and then maybe having like a big group in Boise or something, we would never be able to do what we've done. The only way it works is because you've got local leaders all over the place. And then the second most important thing, not far behind, is their team members. So all of you, and if you're not part of the team, I hope by the end of today you will be part of the team. Okay, so thank you so much to all of you. I want to just say a few quick words about this historic court victory. They ruled in favor of the initiative process, and they ruled unanimously. Yeah. All 5 of them.
Woo!
It's pretty clear that we're reclaiming something very important here. And that's what this new initiative is all about, this effort to get the Quality Education Act on the ballot. It's all about reclaiming our state's commitment to public education. This initiative would increase K-12 education funding by over $300 million a year, and importantly, that would go directly towards some of the most urgent needs in our education system, which could really be summarized most simply as programs and personnel. The most urgently underfunded programs like full-day kindergarten, career technical education, special needs programs, a whole list of critically needed programs that are included in our initiative. And in addition to that, making teacher salaries more competitive so that so many of our teachers don't keep leaving the state or leaving the profession. My understanding is that you've all seen some exodus of teachers leaving in recent months, in the last year. And by the way, which I know this is really important in this community, this initiative is about shifting the burden to fund education back where the Constitution says it should be, which is with the state of Idaho and not with local property taxpayers. I think most of us here probably are happy to vote for local property tax levies because we know that the schools need all the funding they can get. But that's not the way that our Constitution says education ought to be funded. All these levies have to be passed because the state isn't doing its job. So what we are doing that I think will, go over very well with most of the voters in this region, we're actually shifting the burden away from property taxes and back to the state legislature, back to the state of Idaho. And the taxes in this initiative are very simple and they're very reasonable and modest, restoring the corporate income tax rate to what it used to be before it got cut a bunch of times. And then a modest tax increase just on families earning over $500,000 a year, or individuals earning over $250,000 a year. So I should say married couples earning over $500,000 a year, or individuals earning over $250,000 a year. And it's a very modest tax increase because it only applies to the income that a married couple makes over $500,000. So no new taxes on your first $500,000 you make in a year. If you make $550,000 in a year, you're only going to pay new taxes on the final $50,000. So this is a reasonable tax reform that will do a great deal of good for our public education system. And by the way, we're hearing a lot of people in that category. There aren't that many people in that income category, but many of them, we're hearing from them and they actually support this initiative. They're actually saying we can afford this. We need to do this to invest in the next generation. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I want to just say thank you again to Laura and to Shireen, and I want to encourage everyone here to join the team, to be a part of the team, to be a big part of the team. If you haven't already joined, to join it, because that's how we're going to get this thing on the ballot. I'll say a bit more about Reclaim Idaho and everything we're doing and everything we've been doing. I just want to pause for a moment to give a big thank you to our local Latah County leader, Gretchen Wisner. Thank you. And I know that so many people are here who've also been big members of the local team, so that means everything. So thank you all so much. Here we are, about 18 weeks ago. The Idaho legislature enacted and the governor signed into law the most restrictive set of initiative rules that existed anywhere in the country. An awful law, one of the worst laws ever passed by the Idaho legislature, that basically took this important right that we have, this fundamental constitutional right that we have to put things on the ballot. They tried to kill that right. They didn't like what so many of you who are here did by passing Medicaid expansion, which was the only successful initiative in recent Idaho history. They tried to block that from happening they succeeded in blocking that from happening for 6 years. And I also want to be really clear when I say we're talking about almost every single Republican in the Idaho legislature. Now, but that said, Democrats uniformly were on the other side. I also want to point out there was somewhat local, one of the only Republicans who voted on our side to defend our initiative rights was Senator Dan Johnson down in Lewiston. And the only other one was another North Idaho Republican Senator, Jim Woodward. That said, though, that's two in the entire Republican aisle of the Senate. And then it wasn't much better in the House. There were only about 5. So credit to them, but look at what happened. Just about the entire Republican establishment lined up and enacted into law a bill that basically killed Idaho's initiative process and made future initiatives like Medicaid expansion impossible. Well, 3 weeks after they enacted that bill, our organization, Reclaim Idaho, sued them. That was about 15 weeks ago. And then about 12 days ago, the Idaho Supreme Court struck down that law.
Woo. Yeah. Woo-hoo.
An historic decision, really, because what everyone here needs to understand, and this is part of why we're touring around the state, is just to spread this information. The court did not just strike down the anti-initiative law. The court did something far more important. The court recognized for the first time in Idaho history that the initiative process is a fundamental right of the people of Idaho. And that's not just words. It's really important that everyone understands that. It's not just that they called it fundamental right. Okay, thank you. No, that's not it. It's that by calling it a fundamental right, they have guaranteed that the legislature cannot meddle with it again. Because they've created a very strict standard. It's called strict scrutiny, where if the legislature comes back with another one of these bills to try to dismantle the initiative process, the court has said you have got to pass like a sky-high barrier. Otherwise, we're striking that thing down. You've got the utmost scrutiny, and they've made it very clear that it's got to be, number one, for a really compelling purpose. If you're going to infringe on that right at all, you've got to have a really good reason, and it can't be some scam like what you claimed you were doing, like when you said you were empowering rural voters, because that was always fake, and they knew it. It can't be that. It's got to be something real, and if you have something real, it's not clear what that would be. Then you've got to pass a second barrier. You've got to show the court that you've come up with the most narrowly tailored adjustment to meet that purpose. So you can't say, oh, we've got a reason to, we've got a really important reason to infringe on the ballot initiative right. So we're going to require 35 districts. Every single district in Idaho has to gather a really high number of signatures, even though no state in the country has that kind of rule. That's not narrowly tailored. That's like a wrecking ball. So they've got to meet the highest standards, and we are confident, and our attorneys have doubled down on this. A lot of other, former justices and things who have analyzed it, they've said the initiative after this ruling, the initiative process is secure for generations to come.
Yeah. Woo! Woo!
Ever since we got started, ever since we started rolling the camper around the state, there are a lot of members of the legislature, there are a lot of special interest groups who really don't like Reclaim Idaho. And they don't like what so many of you are doing. They don't like what I'm doing. And they have this refrain that they say, and you probably heard it, you've probably seen it on social media, where they say, who do these people think they are? What are they trying to reclaim? Reclaim Idaho, what do they think they're reclaiming? Well, after this recent Idaho Supreme Court ruling, we have a very simple answer. And it's really been our answer all along. We are reclaiming the Idaho Constitution.
Yeah.
Because you know what? The Idaho Supreme Court didn't just rule in our favor. They said that this is one of the gravest threats to the Constitution from the legislature in recent history. And it was such a grave threat that the fact that we were willing, and our private attorneys were willing to defend the Constitution, meant that the court said, for the first time in 41 years, we're going to return all of your legal fees back to you. Because under a doctrine called the private attorney general doctrine, where the court says, you have acted in the place of the attorney general, you have actually upheld the law when they wouldn't.
Woo!
So for the first time in 41 years, they've activated that doctrine. So we are reclaiming the Idaho Constitution because you know what? Article 1, the first article, says that all power is inherent in the people. It doesn't say that all power is inherent in the legislature. It definitely doesn't say all power is inherent in the Idaho Farm Bureau or any of these other organizations that really push this anti-initiative law. Definitely doesn't say all power is inherent in the payday loan industry, which was what attacked the initiative law 2 years ago. It says all power is inherent in the people. Article 3 says that the people reserve to themselves the right to enact and repeal laws. That's in the Constitution. And my personal favorite provision, this is another thing that we're reclaiming when people ask, what are we reclaiming? Who these people think they are to go out and stand up for public education. We are reclaiming Article 4 of the Idaho Constitution, which says that the state of Idaho has an obligation to provide a quality education to every Idaho child. The exact wording of the Constitution goes even further because it says that the state, the legislature, has an obligation to provide a thorough and uniform system of public schools, meaning it doesn't just have to be quality, it has to be equal. So it does. So your opportunity in life shouldn't rely on your zip code. It doesn't matter if you're born in a affluent suburb or in a tiny town. You deserve a quality education. That's what our next initiative is all about. That's what I wanted a chance to talk with you all about the Idaho Supreme Court case, but we're really ready for action today. We're ready to go out and put the Quality Education Act on the ballot. Just as we work to put Medicaid expansion on the ballot, this initiative would increase funding for K-12 education by over $300 million a year, go directly towards strong programs from career technical education to arts and music and drama, and a whole list of other programs that are underfunded. It would go towards more competitive teacher salaries, more competitive wages for support staff. We have got to get this on the ballot because what is really at stake here is whether we're going to reclaim this state's commitment to a strong public school system.
Reclaim Idaho!
What everyone's complaining about, including conservatives, is that the legislature wasted their money by bringing up this bill when so many people believed it was unconstitutional. Like what I was just remembering in Sandpoint and telling people about is that they did a public opinion poll a year back in 2020, and they found that 80% of Idahoans think the initiative process is already hard enough.
Yes.
And that includes the large majority of Republicans believe the initiative process is already hard enough. And then when they passed this law this awful new law a couple months ago, it created more widespread public discussion than just about any law that the legislature has ever passed. About 5,000 people called the governor's office to express their opinion about it, and 96% of them were against it. I think there were 80 calls or something for it. It was overwhelming. I've been on, I was on KRFY public radio in North Idaho, but last couple days, but I've also been on conservative talk radio. And the majority of the people who call in, just ordinary listeners, are on our side on this. And the hosts were on our side too. So it's just this overwhelming case of the will of the people is really clear. Is even more, Medicaid expansion is very popular around the state. Initiative rights are way more popular even than Medicaid expansion was. So it was a really clear case that the people were on one side, legislators were on the other. I will say pretty much when I say legislators, every Democrat in the legislature was on the side of the people. almost every Republican was against the people on this issue. There were only 2 Republican senators that stood up for the rights of the people, and one of them was Senator Jim Woodward.
Oh, that was hoping you were going to say that.
So one of only 2. The other was Dan Johnson in Lewiston. And then there were only, of all the House reps, I think only about 5 Republicans took the side of the people, defended the rights of the people. Representative Addis and Senator Vick were actually the co-sponsors of the bill. Sage Dixon ended up co-sponsoring it too. So this was really a strangely kind of born of a really tiny faction of people in North Idaho. We think it probably was also the doing of a couple major special interest groups. We know that the Idaho Farm Bureau was a really big part of it. But then importantly, something people should remember is that the actual legislative leadership of the Republican Party got fully behind it. They were all in. And then not only did they pass this awful law that pretty much the whole population was against, they also, when we sued, and it became clear that the Idaho Supreme Court was going to hear that lawsuit, these legislative leaders said, we don't even, we're going to double down on this. The Idaho Attorney General isn't enough. That we don't trust that they'll defend it well enough. So we're going to take more taxpayer money and we're going to hire our own private attorneys to defend it twice. So it was our lawsuit up against 2 different legal teams, both the Attorney General's legal team and the legislature's legal team. And the legislature hired probably the most expensive law firm in the state of Idaho. Their discount rate was $470 an hour. That's who they hired to use taxpayer money to hire a private attorney, $470 an hour, the discount rate, in order to defend a law that takes away our rights. So using, just dumping taxpayer money into a lawsuit that actually takes away the rights of those same taxpayers. It's pretty extreme.
Those are shocking facts. That was what gave me the sense of relief and hope for our state when the Idaho Supreme Court came down with their decision and threw that awful law out. I had not felt hopeful at all, and when that came across, I thought there's hope for us as a state.
Good. It's music to our ears, because I think that could be the greatest result of all, if this actually instills hope in people that it's actually worthwhile to try to do what we're doing. Right. Anyone who's not satisfied with this political establishment, if this court case can actually empower them and give them some hope, then that's an even bigger victory in some ways. case challenged a second law, not just the initiatives law, but a second law, which you could call the effective date law. And this is a law they passed a year ago, pretty quietly. No one really complained very loudly when it happened. No one was really watching, but we even at the time were busy with other things. But what they did is they said, the legislature said, initiatives can't be implemented if an initiative wins at the ballot, gets a majority of the vote, it can't go into effect until about 8 months later.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Which is like, why would they do that? There's no really good reason why they would do that. The only rationale that we can think of, which does make a lot of sense, is they want to give themselves this big window of time to repeal it. They want to give themselves the entire legislative session after the election to repeal it, with the idea that, and they know from practice, that it's a lot easier to repeal something if people haven't actually felt the benefit of it yet, right? So think about if healthcare didn't go into effect and then you repeal it before people even feel the benefit of having more healthcare coverage, or having healthcare coverage for the first time. But think about if you got a raise through the minimum wage. If it went into effect and then the legislature repealed it, you'd be really angry. Maybe you'd get into politics for the first time in your life if you had politicians actually dock your pay, like actually take your money away from you. So they don't want that kind of thing to happen. So the legislature, so they said, no, we're gonna mess with the process, delay the effective date so that we can repeal things before they even go into effect. So we said, no, that's also unconstitutional, because that really violates the right of the people to make their own laws independently of their legislature, which is what the Constitution says. So it shouldn't be that the legislature has this big role in determining how it gets implemented and things. So we challenged that in court, and the court struck that down too. So so now it's back to where a law can go into effect pretty much right after the people vote for it.
I listened to the court proceeding, and I'm not a legal beagle. But it was impressive. Our representation. I mean, it made sense to me, and I'm not legal, so it was impressive.
You're talking about the attorney representing Reclaim Idaho.
Yes.
Deborah Ferguson.
Very good.
Deborah Ferguson. Everyone should be. Yeah. Feel free to send Deborah Ferguson a letter or something. Thank you letter, because one thing a lot of people are saying since our court victory is these legislators, they're complaining about the legislature rightfully, and they say things like, legislature just passes these unconstitutional laws knowing that they'll get struck down, but they do it anyway. They waste taxpayer money. They know that it'll get struck down. That's half right, but it's also half wrong, because these laws don't just get automatically struck down because they're unconstitutional.
No, that's right.
Someone has to do the hard work of putting together a really strong case against a law and make the argument that it's unconstitutional. And Deborah Ferguson, together with her law partner Craig Durham, who is not arguing the case in the oral argument, but who worked hard on the case as well, they put together, by all accounts, the strongest case you could imagine against this law, this anti-initiatives law. And without them, who knows, it could still be on the books. So they're real superheroes in this situation. This all turned out very well, but we would have rather not had this entire fight to begin with. We can take some joy in the fact that these legislators set out to really make the process harder and to make it, or to really kill the initiative process, and they ended up making it stronger.
Yes.
So that's a pretty incredible, series of events that happened there. Yeah, that's it. So that's a great word for it. It backfired on them.
I spent that whole year sitting in my room on my computer being frustrated, wanting to do something, and then I saw Reclaim Idaho, and I started following it. and I friended you, and you led me to Luke, and I'm just so glad. I feel worthwhile. I feel like I'm doing something good for this state.